This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. Dr. Michael Foley is a professor at Baylor University, a Catholic theologian, a mixologist, and the author or editor of over a dozen books and 500 articles. He is the best-selling author of Drinking with the Saints, Drinking with Your Patron Saints, and Dining with the Saints. Last year he came out with the book Why We Kiss Under the Mistletoe, Christmas Traditions Explained. Michael Foley, welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be on.
What did I skip from your introduction?
Oh,
A lot, probably, right?
well, I'll tell you, my latest book is called Lost in Translation, Meditating on the Orations of the Traditional Roman Rite.
Wow, that sounds like a very interesting topic, and we'll make sure that we'll give that information of how our viewers and our listeners can get that book before we're done here today. But since it is the Advent season, we want to talk specifically about the book that came out last year, which is Why We Kiss Under the Mistletoe, Christmas Traditions Explained. And so tell us, how did that book come about? I guess you're famous for your drinking books. How did you go from drinking to Christmas traditions?
Well, the drinking books are also liturgical books. They follow the feast days of the church year, and I've always loved the different customs of the liturgical year, and especially around Christmas. And who doesn't? You know, you grow up as a kid and you love the special customs of Christmas. So I've always been, like everybody else, in love with the Christmas season. And this was an opportunity to dive deep into those customs and get to the meaning behind them. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
Let's talk about some of the more famous Christmas customs. Let's give us a little bit of a glimpse into, let's say, since this is Advent, an Advent wreath. Where did the Advent wreath come from?
From the Lutherans, actually. It was a 19th century Lutheran pastor who did it for an orphanage to help the kids get excited for Christmas. And originally it was more than 4 candles. I don't know if it was a candle for every day, but anyway, they eventually figured out just 4 candles. In the United States, we have the candles liturgically coordinated,
Right.
with, either violet or a rose, 3 violet candles or purple candles, 1 pink candle or rose candle. In Europe, they don't do that. They use either like white or red candles.
And so was that in Germany? Is that where that started, or yeah?
That is correct. Yeah, a lot of our good Christmas customs started in Germany and then were adopted by the English and then spread to America.
How about Christmas cards? I think that is English, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, there are different theories, but it is believed that Louis Prang, who was a German American, began the tradition of Christmas cards, printing them, and he went to the only German Catholic church in Boston, Holy Trinity German Church, and began printing them. And initially, they were not Christmas cards, they were New Year's greeting cards, but then they eventually shifted to Christmas.
How about, I always thought that, maybe it was the Hallmark Company that invented it, but I guess I was wrong with that. How about eggnog? That's something that you should be right up your alley, since it's a Christmas tradition and also a drink. Where did that come from?
That is more recent. Again, that's sort of 19th century. Wassailing is a very old Christmas tradition. That means just having like a Christmas punch, or a wassail is the name of a Christmas punch.
Right.
Eggnog, 19th century. A lot of Christmas drinks or winter drinks are very rich in calories. to help fortify against the cold. And so eggnog kind of fit that bill.
We also talking about the Germans. They have Glühwein, which is a mulled wine. So there's plenty of opportunities to indulge in alcoholic beverages around the holidays. Some people love it. A lot of people hate it. What about fruitcake?
Well, the joke is that fruitcake was actually mentioned in the Old Testament, and that fruitcake that was mentioned in the Old Testament may still be around because they never age and then nobody eats them. So
Just regifted.
exactly, exactly.
How about, well, let's talk about kissing under the mistletoe. Where does that come from?
That was a fun thing to investigate. The short answer is we're not 100% certain, but my own theory is that uh, the English and the Irish took a druidic respect for the mistletoe as a sign of peace
Hmm.
and added their own signature greeting as Christians, which is the kiss of peace.
Hmm. That is
Because no one
interesting.
was kissing under the mistletoe until the Christians.
Huh.
The Druids totally respected it, and they would make truces under the mistletoe, but they didn't kiss.
Huh.
And initially, the kissing was part of courtship. It would be a marriage proposal.
So if you kissed someone under the mistletoe, you'd be engaged to that person.
That is correct.
We have to be
And then
careful.
and then the standards got relaxed,
Yeah, good.
and then
So,
they still try to have an inbuilt moderation. So mistletoe has white berries, and so every time you kiss someone under the mistletoe, you had to remove a berry. And then when all the berries were gone, so were your kissing rights.
no more kissing, right? Either that or when your chapstick is gone, you have to stop,
That's
right?
right.
So those are some of the things that that piqued my curiosity. What are some of your favorite Christmas traditions?
Well, who doesn't love the Christmas tree? And I'm happy to report that, contrary to a popular belief, this was not a pagan custom that was later baptized by Christians. Which, I mean, even if it were, it'd be no big deal
Right.
because we Catholics, especially, are very good at taking the best of any culture and converting it to a divine or pious use.
Mm-hmm.
So it's no big deal if it had been that, but it turns out it wasn't. There was a medieval custom of honoring Adam and Eve on December 24th with paradise plays, stories about their expulsion from the fall, their expulsion from the Garden of Eden.
Right.
Um, and this was done in preparation for appreciating the significance of the incarnation on December 25th.
Mm.
So they had on stage something called a paradise tree, which was decorated with symbols of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was apples, and the tree of eternal life, which was symbolized by actually hosts, unconsecrated hosts. And eventually these plays were suppressed, and but people loved them so much that they brought those trees into their homes. And you wouldn't put it up until December 24th. That custom lasted well into the 1960s, and the apples became red balls, and the hosts became sweets like candy canes.
Hmm. Oh, that's very, very interesting. Now, when you were doing the research for this book, and I can imagine it took you quite a while to gather all this information, what is the one or two items that actually surprised you or shocked you?
I was surprised and slightly shocked by the dark side of Christmas.
Yeah.
It was amazing to see how many legends there are about ghosts and ghouls, werewolves, um, goblins, uh, devil creatures like Krampus.
Mm.
Uh, it was amazing to see the the popularity of these stories during what we think of as a very warm and fuzzy, sentimental time of year.
Hmm.
But I actually liked it because it sort of added depth, if you will, to the holiday, that Christ is rescuing us from all these powers of darkness.
True. But it doesn't make for a good night stories for the little kids, though, right? Especially things like Krampus, which are quite frightening.
Although I guess it is like the early fairy stories, which were also very dark before
That's
they got
true.
Disneyized.
Yeah,
The point is to put the fear of God into the little ones.
yeah, for sure, and that would certainly work. Now, your other books, your international bestsellers are about drinking. You have a book, obviously the most famous is Drinking with the Saints. What kind of drink would Saint Nicholas have, for instance?
Well, we don't know what he would have had back in his day, being from Myra in the 4th century. He didn't have as many options as we do.
Right.
Um, but he's got milk and cookies during his visit. But I have a couple of recommendations for Saint Nicholas.
All right.
One is their original concoctions by one of them by my friend Peter Kwasniewski, called the Incensed Bishop, because of a legend that he slapped the heretic Arius at the Council of Nicaea. But actually, you mentioned glue wine.
Hmm.
St. Nicholas's feast day on December 6th is a great, and the week thereafter is a great time to enjoy mulled wine. That's a good traditional way to honor the bishop.
Good. Good. You mentioned your latest book. What was the title again?
Lost in Translation.
Yeah. What? Tell us about that. What will readers get from that book?
Well, it examines some of the prayers of the old Roman Missal, and I look at everyone, when you go to Mass, you often focus on the Bible readings. You make sure you understand the epistle, the gospel, etc., which is great. But there are these other prayers, the communion, the prayer during the offertory, and the prayer at the end of Mass, that are specific to every Sunday of the year. And they actually are beautiful prayers that are extremely well crafted. And they're sort of neglected gems in our liturgical life. And so, but they were all originally written in Latin, and in the Latin, they're even better. So my argument is that something is lost in translation. You have to translate it, of course. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's good to try to get into the original language to see what other little treasures are there. So that's what I do in the book.
The does it? I mean, we expect that the church has translated these from the Latin until the vernacular. Is there a problem with the way they do that? What is getting lost in translation?
What gets lost in translation, excuse me, is puns, wordplay, alliteration, things like that. I mean, imagine trying to translate Shakespeare into another language.
Mm-hmm.
You'd lose a lot of the wordplay.
Mm-hmm.
So the 2011 translation of the New Missal does a pretty good job, although I do argue it does miss a couple things. But in fairness, it was a vast improvement over the previous translation.
Right.
When I lined up the Latin and the 1973 translation and then the 2011 translation, it was shocking to see how sloppy the 1973 translation was. It was like they didn't even try. They didn't even put their heart into it. It was really poor. So we should be grateful for the 2011 translation.
Yeah. So, how can our listeners get a copy of your new book? How can they get the Why We Kiss Under the Mistletoe, Christmas Traditions Explained, and any of the other books that you're so famous for?
They are all sold on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, and wherever fine books are sold.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, Mike Foley, thanks so much for being with us on this edition of Catholic Forum. We wish you a very blessed Advent season and a Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, and to you as well.
Thank you. This is Catholic Forum. I'm Bob Krebs. Sister Ann David Strominger is a sister of St. Francis of Philadelphia. She's the delegate for religious for our diocese, and she's one of my favorite people in the whole world. Sister, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We were just talking about some of the great Christmas traditions that people follow at this time of year, and one of the best, biggest, greatest is the Christmas creche. And I understand there's a big anniversary of that.
That's right. This year we celebrate the 800th anniversary of the visual initiation of the Christmas creche, the manger. Mm-hmm. And so the church is honoring it, and there's a lot of stories around how that all happened. Yeah. So that's what I hope we can share today.
Yeah, please. Everybody has Christmas creche, even non-Catholics, even some of my Protestant brothers and sisters who say, oh, no statues, that's idolatry, but out comes the creche, at Christmas. So it's something that is embedded in all of Christendom. So tell us how that started.
Okay. I also want to say I think it's a very important symbol to connect with what happens in our worlds today, where there's division, mm-hmm. and how St. Francis's desire was to bring unity. In the 1200s, people always assume that the creche was always around, mm-hmm. that Christmas was celebrated the way it is today. And in the 1200s, Easter was the major celebration of the church. Now, it still is. Right. But Francis was so inspired by the humanity of God that he asked the mayor of Greccio, which is a little town in the Rieti Valley, if they could celebrate Christmas in a new way this year. So what he did was he said to him, I want to celebrate this as the Feast of Feasts. I want people to experience God loving us so much that he became human. I want them to know that he was a baby, he was dependent, he was a child. So we are going to celebrate the same way that Scripture tells us about him. And so what the people did in the area was, and they tell us this is in 3 days, so remember they got ready for Christmas in 3 days, is that the people gathered together at the base of the Rieti mountain. Okay, so the monastery or the chapel in Rieti is on this high hill that is snaked up the side of a mountain. Mm-hmm. The people gathered on Christmas Eve at dusk with torches in their hand, excited about what was going to happen to celebrate this Christmas so differently. And as they walked up the side of the mountain at dusk, they began singing pastoral Christmas carols, which is what we would sing at Christmas Mass. Right. And the people started joining them. Something was going on that was different. So they walked up to this small chapel that the Franciscans had, and what they saw was this manger scene. Francis had hay. He had the manger for the baby. Mm-hmm. They had a tangible, visible symbol of what Scripture had always talked about. Mm-hmm. And so at this Mass, Francis came. He was dressed as a deacon, which we don't often see. And he preached at the Mass about the love of God, the Father loving us so much that he wanted to share his Son with us so he could become one with us. And the way he preached was that the people could tangibly experience that baby in the manger, Mary and Joseph, the ox and the ass around, which were also in that chapel at the same time. But his preaching just touched the hearts of the people. And so after that service, what happened was that the people took the hay from the manger. Now, you may hear that people do that today. They take the hay out of the manger and different customs. What do you do with it?
Right.
But they took the hay out of the manger. They took it home to people who were infirmed, and they got better.
Wow.
They took it and fed their animals that hay who happened to be sick with diseases, and they got better. All right. What you found was that as the people left that Mass that day, their hearts were filled with peace. The animosity that was happening within the towns seemed to dispel. So when we talk about that Christmas Eve sense of peace, somehow people were able to put their differences aside and for a while experience that internal peace that God gives us.
That was a miracle, right, Sister?
It really was. I mean, in many ways. And that the story from this little town continues through the years. And so one of the things that the church is also doing this year is that the Franciscans, the Conference of the Franciscan Families in the World, have written to the Pope, and they have received what we call a plenary indulgence on the occasion of the 8th centenary of the Christmas Egregio experienced by Francis of Assisi. So what this really means is that to promote an interior sense of spiritual renewal and increased grace, from the Feast of the Immaculate Conception on December 8th through the Feast of the Presentation in the Temple on February 2nd, anybody who visits churches run by Franciscan families through the world and stops in front of nativity scenes that are set up there will receive a plenary indulgence. They also offer that indulgence for people who are sick, or maybe they can't even go out. But that is part of the practice of the piety around the symbolism of celebrating Christmas. Now, I know I don't have any right to say this, but I believe that the church, that if we have a nativity scene in our home, that God is going to speak to us and grace us through this experience of how we tell the story to our children, to one another, and maybe how we live it out this year.
Right. We certainly could use, some healing of our divisions and some peace in the world this year. So, hopefully that this celebration, this special anniversary will carry through to all of us, from our homes to our nation to our world.
Yes.
And it's funny that you said that that St. Francis had to ask the mayor for permission to do this, and how many of us in our towns throughout America now have to go through the government to get approval to put Christmas symbols or whatever up in the town square. So it's everything comes around.
Well, part of his reason for doing that was that Francis always wanted not to do something revolutionary. He wanted to be connected. So whether it was to the church, to the Pope, he always sought to have a dialogue with them.
Absolutely. Sister Ann David, thanks so much for being with us today on Catholic Forum. Have a very happy rest of your Advent and a very Merry Christmas, and congratulations on this great anniversary for you and your community.
Thanks so much. You too.